Shi Nian was a veteran comic book artist. However, whenever her works involved romance, they always ended up bland. To find inspiration for her next comic, she went to the park to sketch for her upcoming project. Suddenly, a dog ran towards her. Unexpectedly, the dog looked at her and barked. She guessed it wanted her to help find its owner. So Shi Nian followed the dog. Sure enough, she found its owner by the bridge over the river. The dog's owner was incredibly handsome. She was completely stunned. At this moment, the man approached and thanked her. He hoped she could return the dog's leash to him. Shi Nian awkwardly handed it over and wanted to find a topic to start a conversation. At that moment, a butterfly flew past. The dog wanted to chase it, but the leash got tangled around the two of them, causing them to fall to the ground. Their eyes met in awkwardness. The dog jumped up on him, and their lips accidentally touched. The young man quickly stood up and apologized for the incident. He said he would grant her one wish. Just then, Shi Nian received a call from her boss. Her supervisor wanted her back at the company. She told him to wait there for an hour and then rushed off. Before the end of her shift, her supervisor demanded she finish the character sketch. He stood there with a skeptical expression, asking if she could complete the task. Shi Nian sat down and drew without stopping. She finished quickly. The supervisor came over to look at her drawing. It was a romantic love scene, exactly what she had been hoping for. He immediately asked her where she got the inspiration. Shi Nian blushed and said it was a story she had just experienced. The supervisor told her she should get in touch with the male lead for material for the comic. Only then did she remember the man was still waiting there. She hurried off without realizing he had been waiting for her the whole afternoon. He took a piece of paper, wrote his name and phone number on it, and put it on the bench. Then he took his dog and left. When she ran to the riverbank, she couldn't see him anywhere. She had an idea and posted a message looking for him online. She quickly received a response from a netizen. Someone said they had seen him around Xuanming University. So the next morning, she went to Xuanming University to ask a student about him. At this moment, they heard the security guard shouting. Before running away, the student called Shi Nian and told her to go to the architecture department's lecture hall. Shi Nian went directly to the lecture hall on the first floor and unexpectedly saw the man. It turned out he was a professor in the architecture department at Xuanming University. He was both handsome and humorous, which made him popular with the students. Many students attended his classes. Even the cleaning lady came to listen. At this moment, Professor G took out his magic cube and said that anyone who could unlock it could have one wish granted. The students all rushed to the podium wanting to try to unlock it. This sparked the girl's interest. Many students tried but failed. At this moment, a voice rang out. "It's unlocked." He turned to see who had spoken. It turned out Shi Nian had successfully unlocked the Rubik's Cube, so Professor G had to grant her one wish. To achieve her goal, she went to the university's office and found him. She lied and said she was a student at Xuanming University and that she wanted to be his teaching assistant. But Professor G had one condition. If he could remember her name after 7 days, he would hire her as his teaching assistant. Shi Nian was overjoyed, but she didn't know that Professor G suffered from a condition where he couldn't remember people's names. Even for friends he saw every day, he had to use his phone to scan their faces to know their names. To get Professor G to remember her name, she started looking for answers online. When he was giving a lecture, she hid under the table and held up a sign with her name. She even incorporated an idiom into her name. Professor G, not wanting the students to misunderstand, deliberately dropped his pen, then sat down. He looked at her and asked what the idiom meant. He said since she wasn't married, why would there be a broken relationship? Then Professor G directly kissed her lips. But this scene was just a dream of Shi Nian. However, this dream inspired her. The next day in class, Shi Nian actually hid under the desk. But Professor G saw her right away. He didn't understand. He told her to go back to her seat immediately. This made the students laugh. But she had an idea. The next day, Shi Nian surprised him by wearing a shirt that had her name printed on it. When she saw Professor G ignoring her, she wrote her name directly on his food. On his teacup, on his computer screen, everywhere, it was her name. When they were in class, she didn't forget to show off, leaving him speechless. After class, she took out her phone and made noise in the office, making the female teacher really irritated. She went over to tell her to tone it down. Professor G also stood up and told Shi Nian to get something for him, but he called her Wu. Shi Nian was annoyed. Why Wu and not Sai? Or maybe it was because the 5 elements were missing Earth. She couldn't figure out what it meant. Seeing that she had a few more days, Shi Nian could only try her hardest. No matter what, she had to make Professor G remember her name. When Professor G arrived at school, His colleague greeted him and said Shi Nian was really a good. Even the cleaning lady liked her and asked Professor G to give teaching assistant Shi Nian a glass of health tea. She hoped they could be together. The head of the Department of Education praised Shi Nian when he saw him, saying she was smart, quick, and reliable. He told him to reward her. But Professor G wasn't happy. It started to rain heavily. He decided to take an umbrella and go home, but she chased after him. Unexpectedly, a car drove past, and both of them were splashed with water. They had no choice but to return to school to change clothes. Professor G found a set of clothes and threw them at Shi Nian, telling her to change. Facing a person who is obsessed with man, Professor G couldn't take it. He ran into another room. Only after Shi Nian finished changing did Professor G enter the changing room. Shi Nian was standing outside, imagining Professor Ji's muscles. Unexpectedly, just as he walked out, her hand landed on his chest. She said she was sorry, it was an accident. She even swore on her honor, but that wasn't persuasive to him at all. Professor G asked what her motive was in approaching him. Unexpectedly, Shi Nian answered frankly that she liked him from the moment she met him. She wanted not only his body but also his heart. She walked towards him, expressing her feelings, but she accidentally stumbled into his arms. Her father-in-law saw this scene and wondered if they were in a teacher-student relationship. Shi Nian quickly pulled out her ID card, confirming that she had graduated. Her father-in-law looked at the ID card and said that their zodiac signs were very compatible. He immediately pulled out his phone and wanted to calculate their birthdays and birth charts. Professor G couldn't take it anymore. He asked his father-in-law what he was doing there. It turned out that his father-in-law had arranged a blind date for him. With no choice, he said he already had a girlfriend. It was the girl sitting next to his father-in-law. Shi Nian was happy to hear this. She jumped up to hug him, but he stopped her. However, this didn't affect Shi Nian's attitude. She turned to his father-in-law and reassured him that no matter what, she wouldn't let him go to someone else. She would be responsible for Professor G. He immediately accepted their relationship. The next day, she intentionally dressed up beautifully and waited for Professor G very early. But he just glanced at her and left, so she chased after him. She even pretended to fall in front of him, then stretched out her hand for him to help her up. Unexpectedly, he walked past her as if she were invisible. Shi Nian made a plan to move their relationship forward. Unexpectedly, Professor Ji's cousin appeared and got in the way. She told Professor G that Shi Nian was pretending to be close to him, revealing that Shi Nian was not a student at Ming University. She scolded her for being a fraud. Shi Nian knew her lie to Professor G had been discovered, so she left her resignation letter and employee ID card. Then she left dejectedly. Shi Nian walked home in the rain. She got soaking wet and became very sick. She staggered and fainted. Luckily, her roommate found her. Professor G was about to give a lecture, but the new teaching assistant found that the PowerPoint on the USB wouldn't open. She had to call Shi Nian and ask if she had a backup. Shi Nian copied the PowerPoint and then hurried to Ming University. Before the lecture, she gave it to Professor G. But as she was about to leave, she suddenly felt dizzy and fainted again. Luckily, Professor G caught her in time. When she woke up, she was in the hospital getting in the fourth. He was sitting by her bedside. Shi Nian asked him about his lecture. Professor G said he had moved it to tomorrow. At this time, the new teaching assistant called her and said that Professor G had given up his lecture because of her. Shi Nian was touched. On the way home on the bus, Shi Nian couldn't hold back her thoughts. She said frankly, "Ji Yongxin, I like you." Unexpectedly, everyone around them turned to look at them. Everyone was discussing whether her confession had been successful. Professor G was embarrassed, so he pulled her to the back of the bus. Then he told Shi Nian that he wasn't interested in dating, but she still insisted on pursuing him. She swore that she wouldn't give up until she had won him over. At this moment, the bus suddenly braked hard. Shi Nian's phone fell to the ground. Professor G quickly bent down to pick it up. He took advantage of the opportunity and put his business card under the phone. Then he put it in Shi Nian's bag. The bus just arrived at the stop. Professor G got off and quickly left. Shi Nian was disappointed, so she went to her boss to confide in him. She said that she confessed her feelings but was rejected, and now she had resigned as his teaching assistant. She wouldn't see him anymore. At that time, her boss wanted to wipe off some grease from his hands, so he reached into Shi Nian's bag for a tissue. Unexpectedly, he found a business card. Shi Nian took it to look at it, and it was Professor G's card. She was so happy that she forgot everything else. She immediately ran to find Professor G. Shi Nian went to Professor Ji's house. Unexpectedly, the person who opened the door was a man in a bathrobe. She thought Professor G liked men, so she turned to leave, but he pulled her back. The man was about to tease her. But at that moment, Professor G walked out and told her that he was someone who worked with him. It turned out that Xiao Su had always been responsible for Professor G's meals. Seeing Xi Nian, Xiao Sui said he had to go out. Unexpectedly, that was exactly what she wanted. Xi Nian took the opportunity to prepare food for him, and so she became a nanny in Professor G's house. But he set a rule saying she couldn't go into the room downstairs. If she did, he would kick her out. This made Xi Nian very concerned. She wanted to see what was in that room, but she was able to control her curiosity and left. That day, Professor Jai's cousin came to the villa. Xi Nian was curious and asked her if she knew what was inside the room downstairs. Her cousin told her that there was a phone in there, an old phone that people used to use. She thought maybe Professor G was waiting for someone. At that moment, the phone in the room downstairs rang. The two of them quickly ran to see. Xi Nian was afraid that if they didn't answer, the caller would hang up. So she went directly inside. Picking up the receiver, she heard nothing on the other end, so she called back. Unexpectedly, Professor G had come back home. He looked at Xi Nian angrily and dragged her out of the room. Xi Nian wanted to explain, but he stopped her and angrily told her she was fired. Then he turned and left. Professor G locked himself in his office. He heard a voice inside the radio. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry." Professor G immediately chased after her. Watching Xi Nian leave, he used his phone to turn on the streetlights for her, lighting her way home. He just stood there in the distance, watching her figure fade away, without saying a word. After returning to his room, he continued to finish his drawings, but couldn't help but call out her name. He realized she had already left. He locked himself in his room all day, making his cousin truly unable to stand it anymore. So she called Xi Nian. As soon as she heard the news, Xi Nian ran to Professor G's house without hesitation. As soon as she saw him, she asked if he was okay. If he didn't like it, she would leave immediately. As Xi Nian turned to leave, he grabbed her hand and pulled her back, causing them to fall to the floor. She quickly helped him up and asked if he was all right. Knowing he wasn't feeling well, she took the responsibility to take care of him. She apologized for what happened before, and he agreed to forgive her. He continued to let her stay by his side and pursue him. A while later, she accidentally dropped 2 bottles of medicine on the ground. Professor G mistakenly took the cold medicine for sleeping pills and took 2. He had to attend an important event. He hoped that Xi Nian would go with him. She wanted to change into different clothes, but Professor G said he had ordered a set for her. Xi Nian was very happy to hear this, but the set he ordered for her was Peppa Pig. He also asked her to hold a promotional sign. He, on the other hand, was dressed handsomely and cheerfully cut the ribbon for the new bookstore to the applause of everyone. Then he toured the bookstore with the director. Unexpectedly, he suddenly felt dizzy. Luckily, Xi Nian appeared and caught him. She thought he had a fever and wanted to take him to the hospital, but he told her he was very sleepy. He must have taken the wrong medicine. Xi Nian could only take him to find a place to rest for a while. Seeing Professor G sleeping soundly, Xi Nian couldn't help but nod off. Suddenly, her phone rang, startling her. She quickly stood up, causing Professor G to roll off the bed. Xi Nian wanted to help him up, but because of her bulky clothes, she couldn't lift him. She could only go to answer the phone first. It was from Site, her roommate. He explained that at the release ceremony of Lu Qingwu's comics, he angrily accused her of plagiarizing and deceiving everyone. After he said that, he ran away, and the security guards chased after him. Not knowing what to do, Site called Xi Nian for help. Before leaving, she went to check on Professor G. She was also afraid that the noise outside would disturb him, so she closed the emergency door. She even locked it and put a "Repair in Progress" sign in front of the door. Only then did she feel comfortable leaving. After she left, Professor G woke up. He suddenly saw Site. It turned out that he was his younger brother who had run away from home many years ago. He turned around and chased after him, but couldn't open the door. In a moment of urgency, he kicked the door. This resulted in him injuring his leg. Site took the opportunity to quickly escape. At this moment, Xi Nian was downstairs looking for him. Unexpectedly, she was grabbed by Lu Qingwu. When she took off her Peppa Pig hat, she realized it was Xi Nian. It turned out that Xi Nian had been passionate about drawing comics since high school. Lu Qingwu had known about this, so they collaborated on a comic and used the name Qi Qingwu. They created their first comic called Beyond the Clouds. As soon as it was released, it topped the comic readership charts. Unexpectedly, Lu Qingwu held a press conference announcing that she had completed the work on her own. This made Xi Nian furious. From then on, the two went their separate ways. Unexpectedly, they met again after many years. Lu Qingwu thought that Site had embarrassed her in front of everyone because of Xi Nian, so she told the security guards to take Xi Nian away. Unexpectedly at this moment, Professor Ji came running over and dragged Xi Nian away with him. But Lu Qingwu still wouldn't let go. As a result, Professor Ji became angry. He took out his phone to scan her face. Then, he coldly said, "Comic book artists aren't police officers. Since you're not a police officer, what makes you think you can arrest someone?" He pulled Xi Nian away. Lu Qingwu was speechless and could only watch them leave. That night, as Xi Nian slept in Professor Ji's room, she rolled over and hugged him. She thought it was a pillow. She touched it and felt something wasn't right. She opened her eyes and saw Professor Ji. She was very curious. She hadn't slept in the wrong room. So how did he get here? At that moment, Professor Ji suddenly sat up. Xi Nian looked at him in astonishment, but he directly picked up his blanket and pillow, then stood up and left. When he went out, he locked the guest room door and put the key in his pocket. Xi Nian followed him to his room. He threw the blanket on the floor, lay on the bed, and went back to sleep. Xi Nian took the blanket and wanted to go back to her room. Then she realized that he had locked the door, and the key was in his pocket. She wanted to get the key from his pants pocket, but he grabbed her and wouldn't let her go. Xi Nian was speechless. The next morning, she had no energy at all, but Professor Ji didn't know he had sleepwalked the night before. He asked her if she had stayed up late. He said not getting enough sleep would affect her work. There is a limit for everything. She was thinking and angry. Who didn't let her sleep? Site had been forced home to inherit his family's enormous fortune. Unexpectedly, he received a phone call. It said that the sales of his newly released comic had reached #1. Site, for his ideals, chose to give up the inheritance and pursue comic art. Unexpectedly, his brother forced him into a car. Then he blocked the door. He used Site's phone to answer the other person. Unexpectedly, the person on the phone was Xi Nian, but neither of them recognized the other's voice over the phone. Because the signal wasn't good, they only spoke a few sentences and then hung up. Professor Ji looked at the phone. The name was "The Person I Like." At this moment, Site jumped out of another door and ran away. He didn't hesitate to run to Xi Nian's company. But she wasn't there. Her coworker took out a contract. It had his name and Xi Nian's name on it. He told him that in Xi Nian's eyes, he wasn't just her assistant, but also a comic book writer. Site was very touched. He was curious and asked where Xi Nian had gone. Her coworker told him that she had gone to find the male lead in her comic and gave him the address. Site ran to the address. He happened to see Xi Nian walking out. He thoughtfully put a helmet on her. Unexpectedly, Professor Ji saw them. He could only watch them leave with wide eyes. Meanwhile, the two of them went to the riverbank. Site wanted to confess his feelings to Xi Nian, but the words got stuck in his throat. Then, he ran to buy Xi Nian 3 balloons, hoping that she would be happy every day. After that, the two of them rode the electric bike back home. Suddenly, the brakes suddenly failed. The bike didn't stop until it ran out of battery. They could only push the bike back home. They didn't know that Professor Ji was still watching them from the car. When they entered their home, he followed silently. His sneaky appearance drew the attention of the security guard. Just as he was looking around, the security guard blocked his view and asked who he was looking for. Professor Ji took the opportunity to ask about the two people. The security guard said they were a couple. He questioned, "A couple?" At this time, he saw the lights in the room turn off simultaneously. The security guard then added, "Young people are so full of energy." Professor Ji was so angry he paced back and forth. The security guard started talking. "What should I do when I see my brother and his girlfriend renting a room?" Professor Ji was furious and yelled at him. "What are you talking about?" The security guard was startled and almost dropped his phone. He said, "I'm just looking at a trending topic on Facebook." "Why are you looking at me like that?" Professor Ji was too lazy to say anything else, so he turned and left. Then, Xi Nian received a call from Professor Ji. He said he had something to give her. He told her to be at his house in half an hour. She quickly ran outside and hailed a cab. She kept urging the driver to go faster. Unexpectedly, Professor Ji's car was in front of her. He suddenly turned the steering wheel and drove in front of the taxi. Xi Nian told the driver to change lanes. But there was really no way to switch lanes. When the light turned red, Professor Ji left the taxi behind. He got back to the villa and quickly parked his car. He rushed inside. Then he got a cup of tea and took a book from the table, pretending to be sitting at home. Suddenly, he heard the doorbell ring. Shi Nian arrived just in time. He acted coldly and said she was late. She said, 30 minutes. I'm right on time. They went inside together. Only then did she realize that Professor G had called her just to sharpen a pencil. Shi Nian was completely speechless. She complained that he could have just bought a pencil sharpener. Why did he make her rush over? Professor G wanted to know everything, so he asked where Shi Nian had gone that night. Knowing that she and her roommate went out to enjoy the night air, he felt relieved. Shi Nian told him that they rode their electric bike out for a drive, and it was really fun. He asked if riding an electric bike could make someone happy. She said of course it was fun. It's fun to ride out and enjoy the night air. Out of the blue, Professor G had an idea. The next morning, he prepared an electric bicycle. Shi Nian felt curious. She said, "You don't look like you know how to ride an electric bike at all." But he didn't get angry. Instead, he handed her a helmet and said, "Who said I was going to ride? You're driving me." Shi Nian didn't know what to do, so she could only ride the electric bicycle. She suddenly imagined Professor G hugging her and felt happy. Unexpectedly, he put a teddy bear in front of her. Then he put both hands on the bear, making Shi Nian feel disappointed. They kept riding on the road. Then the bike suddenly ran out of battery. Shi Nian asked Professor G what to do. He said, "Isn't there a pedal? You can pedal yourself." She had no choice but to pedal herself, but the bike was already heavy enough. She had to carry a 90-kilogram adult too. Shi Nian was exhausted and out of breath. Finally, she managed to bring him to the company. She received a voice message from Tae. He said, "It's too late, but you still need to boost the sales." Then he cursed her evil boss. Shi Nian went on a business trip with Professor G for the first time. She spent the whole trip trying to make him laugh. Sadly, he thought she was annoying. But when he turned his head towards her, he saw a horse head. This scared him. Shi Nian's voice came from behind, asking if it was funny. Unexpectedly, Professor G angrily told her to sit in the back. Shi Nian could only take off the horse's head. Then she obediently ran to the back seat and sat down. When they got there, she was too busy looking at the map. She bumped right into Professor G. He scolded her, asking if she had forgotten she was here to work. But she confidently promised him, "You just have to work hard and do your job well. As for playing, I can handle the burden alone." Professor G was about to question her. "I'm in charge of the meeting, and you're in charge of playing?" Shi Nian was speechless. In a flash, she saw a notice for a fireworks show. She excitedly pulled Professor G to see it. Then she insisted that he watch the fireworks with her, but he refused. She had no choice but to take a picture and post it on her wall. Unexpectedly, Professor G saw it, and he quietly bought 2 tickets. At this moment, Shi Nian took out the message her father-in-law sent her. He said that he wanted to see a photo of the two of them, so she forced Professor G to take her to find some scenic spots to take pictures. They went to a princess villa, but Shi Nian took pictures very professionally. She was lying down on the ground, kneeling, and even crawling up the steps to take pictures. She took lots of handsome photos of Professor G. Then she called him over and asked him to take some pictures of her. She happily posed. Professor G took pictures of her seriously. He sent Shi Nian the photos he had just taken. Shi Nian opened them up and found that none of them were good. He said he didn't understand what style she wanted. He had added a layer of filter. She said angrily, "Is there a problem with the fighter?" But he coldly replied, "Maybe it's a problem with the person." She could only ask, "Do I look like this in your eyes?" But Professor G said, "That's good enough. What else do you want?" Shi Nian was completely speechless. At this moment, Tae learned that she was on a business trip in Shinan. So he decided to go there to find her. But he suddenly bumped into Lu Qingwu. He heard that she wanted to go to Shinan, so Tae didn't think twice and got into her car. But in the car, he found documents about him. He questioned Lu Qingwu about why she wanted to investigate him. Only then did she realize that Tae was the comic book artist, Ki Chan, she had been looking for. So she directly took Tae to the outskirts of the city and invited him to join her team. But he directly refused. Lu Qingwu, in anger, kicked him out of the car. He had to jump into a dirty puddle. She mockingly said, "Those good shoes, are they waterproof?" This made him so angry that he yelled, "Get lost." Lu Qingwu sat in her car, happily driving away. But he was in the middle of nowhere. He could only crawl back home. Lu Qingwu drove off, making Tae angry. He said viciously, "I hope your tires blow, your gas tank leaks, and you encounter bad luck everywhere." Unexpectedly, Lu Qingwu's car really broke down. She opened the trunk and saw smoke billowing out. She wanted to call, but there was no signal. But Tae's phone had a signal, so Lu Qingwu snatched his phone. Then she called for a car. Suddenly, a cow cart arrived. She sat in the cart and complained, "Why did you call for a cow cart? Am I a princess in exile?" He was annoyed and told her to be quiet. He said, "It's good that you have something to sit on." They could only ride the cow cart to the center of town. Sitae saw Shi Nian's post. He guessed she would definitely go see the fireworks show. When he went to the festival, he sat on the carousel, waiting for Shi Nian. But he waited forever and never saw her. He was disappointed and left. But just as Sitae left, Shi Nian and Professor Ji arrived. They completely missed each other. Sitae turned around and saw Lu Qingwu following him. When he saw her, she felt embarrassed and decided to leave and go somewhere else. But she kept looking but couldn't find a way out. She almost fell. Luckily, Sitae came over to help her. It turned out he was following her because he was afraid she would get lost. When he saw that Lu Qingwu's foot was injured, he kindly ran out to buy band-aids. This moved Lu Qingwu. Then, Sitae saw a pair of slippers and a claw machine. He was worried Lu Qingwu would get tired wearing her high heels, so he tried to grab a pair. He also got a pair of slippers. Then, he gallantly bent down to help her put them on. At that moment, the two of them suddenly became friendly with each other. Lu Qingwu's eyes were full of joy. But after changing into slippers, her foot still made it difficult to walk. So Sitae resolutely carried her on his back. The night quickly fell. Professor Ji took Shi Nian to eat crab. But Shi Nian had never eaten crab, so she wanted to pick it up and bite it. Luckily, Professor Ji reminded her in time. She put the crab down. He cracked open one and gave it to her. Shi Nian got to eat crab and drink plum wine, so she was very happy. After eating, they sat on the Ferris wheel to watch the fireworks. Multicolored fireworks burst into the night sky. Professor Ji couldn't help but lean in and kiss Shi Nian. At that moment, Sitae arrived. He just happened to see them kissing. He was stunned. Then he saw Professor Ji turn his head and saw Sitae standing in the distance. Sitae had come all this way to find the person he loved. But unexpectedly, he found her kissing his brother. Professor Ji hugged Shi Nian and walked towards him. Sitae stopped him. He asked why he and Shi Nian were together. At that moment, Shi Nian was also drunk and dazed. She stumbled into Lu Qingwu. Seeing this, Professor Ji told Lu Qingwu to take her to the hotel. Only then did she realize that they were brothers, and that they both liked Shi Nian. She was surprised. Professor Ji turned and told Sitae to go somewhere else to talk. If he had anything to say, he should just get it out. Then, she told her what had happened the night before. After hearing everything, Shi Nian was shocked and asked what had happened between Professor Ji and Sitae. Lu Qingwu said they probably went to resolve their conflict. They both came back injured, but it turned out that they accidentally fell. To help Shi Nian pursue Professor Ji, his cousin invited everyone on a picnic. As soon as they arrived, he was completely stunned by her. She wanted to seduce Professor Ji, so she tricked him into the tent. Then, she asked someone to zip it up. When Professor Ji turned around, she asked him if he liked bikinis. She said she was wearing one today. Did he want to see? Then Shi Nian took off her towel, revealing a dress with a bikini drawn on it. He was afraid that she would do something sketchy again, so he turned around to leave. But she pulled him back, and he accidentally fell onto the mat. At that time, Shi Nian took the opportunity to move closer and give him a kiss. Unexpectedly, a ball was thrown at them. Shi Nian angrily grabbed the ball and ran out, asking who threw it. It turned out to be some kids, calling her a hussy. Shi Nian angrily zipped up the front flap of the tent and ran out to chase after the children. That's how her good time was ruined by kids. But at this moment, Sitae was driving a jet ski on the sea. Suddenly, he lost control and crashed directly into the tent next to him. He quickly ran over, and the girl inside the tent walked out. Unexpectedly, it was Lu Qingwu, who he had always been against. She said that Sitae's jet ski had ruined her lipstick. Then she asked him to compensate her. Sitae grabbed her chin to take a look. Lu Qingwu was very curious and didn't know what he was going to do. Sitae said, "I remember the color of your lipstick. When I get back, I'll buy you a new one. I'll even help you clean up the smudge." Then he turned and left. Unexpectedly, Lu Qingwu called to him and took him onto her yacht. Soon after, he was captivated by the story in the comic. He was so absorbed that he forgot everything else. Meanwhile, the yacht suddenly started moving. Sitae realized the situation was bad and told Lu Qingwu to stop the yacht immediately. But she said stopping it was impossible. But he could choose to swim back to shore. Sitae immediately prepared to jump into the ocean. But when he saw the water, he realized he had seasickness. He was scared and retreated. Lu Qingwu saw this and said smugly to him, This yacht will go all the way to tomorrow morning. But Site didn't give up on leaving. He waved his arm to call for Xiao Sui on the shore. Xiao Sui saw him waving, but thought it meant, "I'm very happy," he shouted back. "Have fun, and be careful." Sita yelled as loud as he could, but it was no use. Meanwhile, Shi Nian ran sadly to her cousin and complained. Her cousin said there was a game that could make her forget her troubles. Shi Nian cheered up immediately and asked her cousin to take her. Her cousin gave them 2 bracelets. She said if they could unlock the bracelets within 24 hours, they would be considered successful, and their entire camping costs would be completely waived. As long as they put their hands close together, the time on the bracelets would run faster. When the time reached a certain point, the bracelet would try to unlock. The faster their hearts beat, the faster the time would run. Shi Nian was very happy to hear this. She wanted to use it to take advantage of the opportunity to deepen her relationship with Professor G. But unexpectedly, he wanted to improve his health. So he dragged her to the beach to run. She didn't understand why they weren't like the other couples. She sat on the beach feeling disappointed. Professor G came over and asked her to go do other exercises with him. When she heard that, she became even more upset. Shi Nian suddenly realized she had been too hasty and turned to run away. A seashell cut her foot. Professor G quickly ran over to check. Seeing the cut on her foot, he took out a handkerchief. He gently wrapped the injury. Then he carried her to find some band-aids. The sky was getting dark, and they sat in the tent together. Professor G said to Shi Nian, "Now, no matter what you want to do, I'll cooperate with you." Shi Nian finally mustered up the courage and gently kissed Professor G on the lips. The couple's bracelet unlocked. Professor G said, "The game is over." Shi Nian was embarrassed, so she quickly ran back to her tent. He sat by the bonfire all night, and she couldn't sleep in her tent. Lu Qingwu's yacht was getting further and further away. She took Site to a deserted island. Lu Qingwu blindfolded him, but when Site opened his eyes, he was amazed by the scene before him. A vast expanse of blue ocean stretched out before them. Below, a creature called blue tears. They only appear during breeding season each year, and are rarely seen. Lu Qingwu asked, "It's beautiful, right?" He smiled and replied, "It is beautiful, worth coming to see. It's definitely worth it." She asked him, "So, do you still hate me?" He shook his head and looked at her, but she asked, "So, do you like me?" He shook his head vigorously. She couldn't help but pinch his cheek and say, "You little stinker." Site told her, "It's a little better than not hating you." Early in the morning, Shi Nian returned to the company. She was exhausted and fell asleep on the floor. Her coworker came to find her and asked if she had received the comic book package. Shi Nian had no idea. Her coworker checked the order and saw that it had been sent to Professor G's company. She hadn't told him that he was the male lead in the story. She was afraid that he would get angry after seeing it. So she quickly called his secretary, but no one answered. She also tried to book a car, but there were none available. So she ordered a delivery service to deliver the package to her. Luckily, she arrived just in time and received her package. But then she suddenly overheard a staff member say that Professor G was about to get engaged. Everyone in the company was gossiping about how he was going to marry the newly returned Director Lin. This marriage was arranged by Professor Jiai's father. Shi Nian couldn't take it anymore and used the excuse to go to the bathroom. Unexpectedly, as she stepped out of the door, she saw Professor G hugging Director Lin. She froze and dropped her bag. She remembered their memories together and couldn't help but cry. All of this was Professor G's way of testing her heart. That night, Shi Nian packed her things and prepared to leave. She looked around at her surroundings and turned to say goodbye to his dog. She probably wouldn't see it again. Professor G suddenly walked over and asked where she was going. She explained that her initial goal wasn't to like him, but to have him play the male lead in her comics. She bowed her head and apologized, then pulled her suitcase and prepared to leave. Suddenly, he ran after her, grabbed her hand and gave her a passionate kiss. Unexpectedly, Lu Qingwu, who was carefully taking Site back, witnessed this scene. The hourglass also fell to the ground. He was disappointed and turned to leave. Lu Qingwu followed closely behind. But in a blink of an eye, he was gone. She kept calling out his name. She was afraid that a boy like him might be in danger. Unexpectedly, Site grabbed her from behind and pressed her against the wall. He questioned her. "You clearly know you're a girl. Why are you pretending to be concerned about me? Don't you know your limits?" She pushed him away and replied, "Who knows? Maybe he will do something stupid for love." Then the two of them talked and decided to go get a drink together to help Site get over his heartbreak. So the two of them went to Lu Qingwu's house. She poured Site a glass of wine, and he drank the whole glass in one gulp. Less than 5 seconds later, he passed out on the sofa. The next day, when he woke up, he found Lu Qingwu standing in front of him. Before he could come to his senses, she started to flirt with him. "Congratulations! Your life has successfully turned a new page. You don't have to act innocent anymore. It's just that your teacher here has a tough job. You don't know how difficult it is to teach someone outside the industry." He angrily told her to shut up. Then she turned and walked out. Site was furious, and she hid by the door, eavesdropping. Lu Qingwu went to the company, but her mind was full of the scene of her kissing Site. She couldn't focus on work at all. Then she received Site's location. It turned out he was at a coffee shop. So, she sat outside the shop and waited. She waited until it got dark and finally waited for him. Lu Qingwu brought up what had happened the night before. But Site said that she deliberately got him drunk and then had ulterior motives towards him. Lu Qingwu immediately took out the video from the night before. Site saw his drunk self and was very embarrassed. He could only awkwardly tell her to stop. "You're a manipulative woman," she said. "You still don't understand? I'm pursuing you." Site ignored her and went straight ahead. But before he could take a few steps, he received a message from Lu Qingwu. He opened it and saw a picture of them. He could only turn back and hug Lu Qingwu, then kiss her. She was startled and pushed Site back, asking what he was doing. He said to her, "That's a stamp for the whole week. Take it and get lost." Then Site left. Lu Qingwu was still stunned. The next day, as Site was drawing comics, she came up from behind and covered his eyes. She wanted to surprise him, but Site directly knocked her to the ground. Lu Qingwu fell and screamed in agony. Site quickly came to check on her, but she didn't forget to act spoiled. She forced him to hug her before she would stand up. He had no choice but to hug her. As soon as she sat down, she started acting up. She took out her phone and showed him the pictures. She said he only had to kiss her once, and she would delete one picture. Site could only follow Lu Qingwu's instructions. Just as he was about to kiss her, he suddenly remembered something. At that moment, he received a call from Shi Nian. To stop Lu Qingwu from talking nonsense, he used a cookie to cover her mouth. Shi Nian asked him to meet her. They both returned to their shared apartment that night. Unexpectedly, Shi Nian wanted to dissolve their partnership. Site was shocked, but he didn't know that Shi Nian was doing this for his benefit. She wanted to give him a better opportunity to grow. So, Shi Nian called Lu Qingwu, hoping she would guide him. Site sat outside Lu Qingwu's door in disappointment. He blamed himself, thinking that maybe he wasn't good enough. So Shi Nian fired him. Lu Qingwu could only comfort him. She took him inside, but as soon as they entered, Site pulled her against the wall and kissed her. The next day, when Lu Qingwu woke up, Site had prepared breakfast for her. He solemnly declared, "From today onwards, we are officially dating." This scared her. Then, she dropped her plate on the floor and asked, "What did you say?" He said, "I'll take responsibility for you." But she said, "You don't have to take responsibility. Why are you pretending to be a man when you're just a kid?" Seeing that she couldn't explain it clearly, Lu Qingwu immediately told him to stand up. Then she pushed him out the door. Site was completely confused, not understanding what she meant. She said to him, "From today onwards, let's pretend this never happened. We're strangers again. Don't come looking for me." On the other side, Director Lin proactively sought out Shi Nian. She asked her why she chose to be his girlfriend when he was so good. She alluded to the ancient architecture restoration project in Xiancheng and told Shi Nian to think about why a man like Ji Yongjin would like her. Shi Nian started to doubt Professor Jiai's intentions towards her, so she secretly went to his office. She wanted to see if she could find any clues. Sure enough, she found a stack of papers in the trash can. It was the document that Professor Ji had researched on the ancient architecture in Xiancheng. It even included information about Shi Nian's father. Then, she looked at the Rubik's Cube next to it. She remembered the time when she unlocked this box. Shi Nian felt this wasn't a coincidence. She began to suspect that Professor Ji was interested in her because he wanted to get close to her father. Shi Nian left his office in disappointment. Just then, he entered. She stood outside the door and happened to hear him talking on the phone. A strange woman's voice on the other end called him, "Darling." They talked intimately. Seeing this, Shi Nian was heartbroken. She went back to the company and started working frantically. She even finished all the work for next week. Her coworker saw that Shi Nian wasn't okay and asked what had happened. Shi Nian told everyone that Professor Ji had someone else. Then she played a recording. She analyzed the sound wave chart and guessed that the other person was a beautiful woman. She was completely better than her. To help Shi Nian adjust her mood, Professor G's cousin decided to help her organize a friendly activity. But unexpectedly, she met her senior from high school there. He was now a famous idol. Suddenly, a group of fans chased after him, so he grabbed Xinian's hand and ran to his private room. Professor Jai's cousin followed and took a picture. She sent it to Xiao Sui. After receiving the photo, Xiao Sui saw Xinian in it and immediately sent it to Professor Ji. At that moment, Xinian was talking to her senior. Unexpectedly, he was narcissistic. Then he took Xinian outside and forced her to say, "I love you." To him, she didn't know what to say. But at that moment, someone pulled Xinian away. It was Professor Ji. As soon as Xinian saw him, she was angry. Professor Ji was confused. He didn't know what she was talking about. Professor Ji immediately took out his phone, then called the other person and put it on speakerphone. The other person said, "Honey," she couldn't remain calm anymore, and grabbed his phone, asking, "Who is this? What's your relationship with Jiangxin? Can you just call him honey and darling casually?" She vented to the person on the phone, but unexpectedly, the person was her future mother-in-law. This was bad. She had already offended her future mother-in-law without even meeting her. A 30-year-old woman who liked a 20-year-old boy and managed to make him fall for her. He was actually a womanizer. Every day he prepared a breakfast table for her. He also thoughtfully put a blanket on her, worried that she might get cold. He always kept a thermos in his bag and casually took out a knee pad for her. Lu Qingwu was very surprised. She asked, "What do I need this country bumpkin stuff for?" He said, "It's for protecting your knees, what else? After all, you're getting older." The remark hit a nerve with her and made her angry. Lu Qingwu had no choice but to put on the knee pad. Site wanted to protect her better, so he went to her company for an interview. He became her employee. In the evening, the company hosted a welcome party for the new employee. 2 employees kept talking about Lu Qingwu. They said she was obsessed with climbing high, and she had seduced countless men. Site couldn't stand to listen anymore. He stood up, went over to them, and angrily punched them. His coworkers rushed over. They finally managed to pull the 3 of them apart. Lu Qingwu advised Site not to do this for her. The next day, Site went to the company and heard his coworkers say that Lu Qingwu had been getting other people to write her comics for years. To encourage Lu Qingwu to draw by herself and to once again be a respected comic artist, he took Lu Qingwu home. He told her to stay home and draw comics. At that time, he noticed Lu Qingwu had long nails and was wearing a ring, so he directly helped her trim her nails. Under his supervision, she actually drew a picture herself. At that moment, her partner called her. Later, the partner took her to meet the director of a film company. But the director didn't highly appreciate their comic. This made Lu Qingwu angry. She stood up and left, but she accidentally bumped into a waiter carrying tea. The tea spilled all over the waiter. The director was angry and stood up to leave. Lu Qingwu was disappointed and went to find Site. Just then, a woman walked out of the room. Lu Qingwu recognized her right away. She was the director of the film company she had met before. Lu Qingwu was surprised. Before she could react, the woman said angrily, You dare hide from me and go out with other women." Lu Qingwu was surprised and asked what her relationship with him was. Site quickly tried to explain but was cut off by the woman. She said, "Men's mouths are full of lies." She couldn't take it anymore, grabbed his collar and asked, "Ji Site, how could you do this? If you want to be a kept man, find someone else. This woman is old enough to be your mother." Site said, "That's my mother." Professor Ji and Xinian suddenly walked in and called out, "Mom, what are you doing here?" The 4 of them stood there awkwardly. Professor Ji's mom suddenly told Professor Ji and Site to switch places. The 2 of them were confused but had no choice but to follow her instructions. But unexpectedly, Professor Ji's mother said, "This combination is even better." Seeing this, Xinian broke the awkwardness. "Sister, you're the beautiful sister with a beautiful voice," she said. Hearing this, Professor Ji's mom said with interest, "With a sweet mouth like that, it's a waste to be with a man of few words like my son." Professor Ji's mother called Xinian to her side. The more she looked at her, the more she liked her. She kept asking if Xinian and Site were in a romantic relationship. Lu Qingwu and Professor Ji were both speechless, but Professor Ji's mother kept talking. "My son, if it wasn't a robbery, he must have found her on the street. Otherwise, with his personality, who would ever like him?" Professor Ji couldn't reply. Then Professor Ji's mother handed them 2 phone tripods. She told them to go back to their daily lives. She wanted to see which couple truly loved each other. The couple that filmed the best would be the one she approved of. Professor G and Shi Nian went to a cat cafe to film. Unexpectedly, they met Lu Qingwu and Si-Tae there. Professor G called Si-Tae to the side to talk. He told Si-Tae that Lu Qingwu had stolen Shi Nian's pen name, Qi Yue Qingwu, back then. Si-Tae went to ask Lu Qingwu if she had stolen Shi Nian's pen name. He also used cyberbullying to pressure her, almost forcing her to leave the comic book world. Si-Tae questioned Lu Qingwu, asking if she was responsible for all this. But Lu Qingwu said, "If I say I didn't do it, will you believe me? You and Shi Nian are clearly the same kind of people. You already made your judgment. Why are you pretending?" She told him to take his things and get out. Before he left, Lu Qingwu revealed something. "Back then, when Shi Nian chased you away, I forced her to do it. I didn't want you to leave at all." Hearing that, Si-Tae could only be stunned. She tried to make a happy face and told him to quickly go find his idol. Seeing Si-Tae leave, Lu Qingwu stopped pretending. She cried sadly. Professor Ji and Shi Nian started to date. He spent 30 million yen to buy Shi Nian a house by the sea. He also specially arranged a workspace for her, complete with specialized equipment for drawing comics. Her comics sold more than 50,000 copies. The company was planning to hold a signing event for her. Unexpectedly, it caused jealousy among her colleagues. The signing event for Shi Nian's new comic was coming up very soon. Fans were skeptical, asking if her comic was truly inspired by real life. She explained that the comic was based on her pursuit of the male lead. But fans demanded that the male lead appear. She was afraid that it would affect Professor G, so she refused their request. Unexpectedly, Professor G walked out, publicly acknowledging their relationship and claiming to be the male lead in the story. Shi Nian was very touched. Behind the scenes, she kept sending him heart emojis. Her adorable behavior made Professor G chuckle. The next day, Lu Qingwu found Shi Nian and said that she didn't deserve Si-Tae's feelings. Lu Qingwu angrily said that she had betrayed her first. Why was she pretending to be upset now? It turned out that Lu Qingwu hadn't been the one who caused the trouble that year. The broker who found Lu Qingwu said that Shi Nian wanted to cancel her contract with her and steal her pen name. But Lu Qingwu didn't believe it. But the whole thing was part of the broker's plan. Lu Qingwu angrily confronted him, asking why he had done this. It was clear that he was stirring up trouble to break up their relationship. He intentionally made her look like a villain. He made her seem like a heartless person, and he dared to call himself her comrade. But he didn't care. He asked Lu Qingwu, "If it wasn't for me, wouldn't you be where you are today?" Lu Qingwu told him, "From today onwards, we are no longer comrades." Lu Qingwu still felt sorry for Shi Nian. So she posted a public apology to Shi Nian online. She admitted that Beyond the Clouds was a collaborative effort by her and Shi Nian. The heavy stone in her heart that had been there for years finally fell. At this time, Si-Tae walked up to her. Lu Qingwu asked Si-Tae, "What if I have nothing left one day? Would you leave me?" Si-Tae replied to Lu Qingwu. He didn't know what she had posted online, and he didn't know what the future held for them. But he would support her, protect her, and told her that life is about starting from one point and then moving on to the next. Then, he took her for a bike ride and continued on their journey. At this time, Shi Nian also saw the article Lu Qingwu had posted online. She was smeared by the Ying Fen company. Shi Nian wanted to help her explain and clarify the situation. But the company's director immediately rejected her. Shi Nian was unwilling to give up, so she called Professor Ji to ask for his advice. He also thought the company's decision was right, but he suggested that Shi Nian should follow her heart. She should make a choice that she wouldn't regret. He also told Shi Nian to do what she wanted. No matter what, he would support her. Finally, Shi Nian decided to help Lu Qingwu clear her name. The company also arranged for legal and public relations teams to protect her. Shi Nian was very touched. Then, she posted information to clarify the matter online. The public relations team started promoting her. Unexpectedly, Shi Nian's fans not only didn't decrease but kept increasing. The surge in fans was shocking. The number of shares was even more frightening. Some veterans in the comics industry, comic book writers, and even famous actors helped share the article. Shi Nian immediately guessed what was going on. She quickly called Professor Ji. Sure enough, he had used all his connections to be her strong backing. Shi Nian was touched. Then she ran to the beach to find Professor Ji. She hugged him from behind. Lu Qingwu also overcame a storm, thanks to Shi Nian's clarification post. Professor Ji's mother went directly to Lu Qingwu's place. She asked her if she truly loved Si-Tae. Lu Qingwu confidently told Professor G's mother, "Please give me your son. It's fine if you agree or disagree. He belongs to me, that's for sure." Professor G's mother felt that she wasn't proposing. She was competing with her for her son. Lu Qingwu bowed her head and said, "Thank you for raising him. But he's mine now." In the end, Professor Ji's mother still agreed to their marriage. They entered the path of marriage, opening a new chapter in their lives. Professor Ji tricked Xi Nian into going to register for their marriage, but he lied and said they were going to take pictures. Before they went in, he kept telling her, "Later, when you go in and take pictures, take pictures. When they ask your name, you have to answer. For everything else, just nod your head." Then Professor Ji directly pulled Xi Nian inside. But as she walked out, Xi Nian felt extremely curious. She felt something was wrong. Earlier, the staff inside kept calling her, saying, "Congratulations." He said, "It's just for show." There is so much competition among these couples service stores these days. And there's also this. She took out 2 marriage registration certificates and asked, "Isn't this the latest trend?" Then Professor G finally admitted that they had gone to get their marriage license. He said, "Maybe this is the best way to teach everyone. If you find someone you like, don't hesitate to take them to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get your license. It can also save you a lot on a dowry." Xi Nian was very worried. After all, her parents didn't know she had registered for marriage. Just then, her mom called. She didn't dare answer the phone. Unexpectedly, Professor G took her phone and answered. He said everything was going smoothly. Xi Nian was shocked and grabbed the phone back, asking her mom what was going on. It turned out that a few days ago, Professor G had secretly gone to her parents' house to ask for her hand in marriage. Xi Nian's mother was very happy with Professor G. She advised Xi Nian, "My eyes don't lie. Your good fortune has reached its limit. Cherish it." Xi Nian hadn't finished speaking when her mother hung up. After a fun evening, when Xi Nian woke up, she saw clothes scattered all over the floor. She wanted to go over and get them. She wrapped herself in the blanket and crawled towards the back. Unexpectedly, the dog saw her and ran over. Xi Nian quickly told him not to come over here. She didn't want Professor G to come over. But Professor G still came over. She was so embarrassed that she rolled over in bed and covered herself with a blanket. But Professor G forcefully pulled her out. He asked her, "Do you still have the face to do this? Why don't you want to look at me?" He kissed her on the forehead and went to prepare breakfast. Xi Nian, like a caterpillar, crawled to get her clothes. Professor G went to see his mother. He wanted to talk to her about the wedding. But before he could speak, his mother announced that she wanted to get married. Professor G was taken aback and made an excuse to leave. Then, he ran to the tea room to hide. Xi Nian could only comfort him. Then she took him to a cake shop. She wanted to eat some sweets to cheer him up. Unexpectedly, when they entered, they saw Professor G's mom and a man sitting together. Seeing his embarrassed expression, Xi Nian quickly stepped in to save the situation. She explained that this man's personality wasn't bad. He would definitely be good to her. But Professor G knew the man. He opened his mouth and asked the man if he wasn't going to say anything. He called him father. It turned out that he was Professor G's father. When he was young, he wanted a career of his own, so he abandoned his family. But after living half a lifetime, he realized that family was more important than anything else. So, now he wanted to get back together with Professor G's mother. From now on, he would be with them. Professor G didn't resent his father. On the contrary, the knot in his heart was untied. Their wedding day quickly arrived. Professor G got down on one knee and swore, "No matter what happens, I will hold your hand and walk through life with you." In the end, people who love each other will always end up together. Thank you for joining us on this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more interesting movies. See you in the next video. Bye. Next video.